Hello and welcome to the Union Pacific Railroad Geneva Subdivision. This is the second of two videos being premiered tonight. This is an operations video on the Global 3 yard crew, which has some swapping out of cars to do within the Global 3 intermodal facilities. Basically, we're moving cars from the load and unload tracks to the classification tracks. As you can see, the check-in, check-out booths are there with their added details. This is the Global 3 yard crew sheet, and you see westbound train 1, eastbound train 2, but in between those two trains you have work that needs to be done just in the yard, moving all cars from loading tracks to classification tracks, and then setting certain cars from the classification tracks to the load unload tracks. So that's what we're going to be seeing here today. So the first thing we need to do is to pull the cars from the load and unload tracks, and we'll be setting them into an empty track in the classification yard. You can see a lot of the added detail that's been featured on the Global 3 intermodal facilities. Mainly here you can see the concrete barriers. Was able to purchase quite a few more concrete barriers. Was on the N3D Facebook page. I got a lot of helpful information from them, from that group. They steered me in the right direction to find some really good concrete barriers, so I was able to pick up some. These actually turned out to be less expensive than the first batch I got, and they're actually better quality. I also used a paintbrush to apply the paint rather than an airbrush, and I think that made a bit of a difference in making them not as grainy as the first batch that I got, but still could use just a few more, but we'll get to that a little bit later. Right now, though, you can see we're pulling one set of cars from one of the two tracks from the unload and load area. Now, one thing you might notice in my intermodal yard here is that I've mixed up the containers. Had a lot of comments from people about having all the containers blocked. Now, from this view, I did keep a lot of the Pacer stack trains containers together and a lot of the K-line, since that's what I saw when I lived in Rochelle, but most of the other ones are mixed up. You can see the hub group and EMP mixed up. So anyway, we pulled the cars out and we're putting them into classification track 4. Very prominent in this view, by the way, is the JB Hunt containers there on the ground. Those should not be on the layout at all. You may or may not know that JB Hunt has a contract with BNSF, so the BNSF has exclusive movement or exclusive contract with JB Hunt. So all the JB Hunt containers are on BNSF trains, and you won't find them anywhere in Global 3, but I have them. I'm looking for a way to give them away. So you might be a lucky person to get these freebies. I'm trying to figure out a way to do that. All right, as we're working the yard here, you can see a manifest train pulling through. And since we set out the containers from the load unload area into track 4, we have 4 sets of cars that we're going to be pulling from the classification track, and we're going to be putting them into the load unload tracks. So we have one set of 3 here that we're picking from track 3, and then I think the other set of 3 is in track 2. You might have noticed that in some areas I have the containers, the concrete barriers right next to each other, and then other areas they're kind of spaced out. And I've been doing a lot of research and looking at videos and pictures of intermodal yards, especially Union Pacific yards. And I've seen kind of a trend that if the concrete barriers are dividing between pavement and railroad trackage, they'll space them out. Whereas if it's between, if it's on the pavement dividing two areas of pavement, they have them right next to each other. There you see an intermodal triangle moving by. Let's see if those containers are mixed up or not, or if they're still blocked. So the first set are kind of mixed up. Second set looks like it's all EMP, that's blocked together. Sorry about that. Second set is all APL, that's still blocked. I guess I didn't do as well as I thought I had. This next one has hub group and EMP. They're all green, but they are different. And then that next set is definitely mixed up, and I think the rest of it's pretty much a mixture. So moved quite a bit of them around to kind of get the idea that they're not all blocked, but still having some blocked, because you do see them blocked from time to time. So anyway, back to the barriers. You can see that in the foreground there, they're spaced out because it's between the pavement and the track. And then once I move my arm there, and the back towards the booth, that's the check-in booth. You can see the concrete barriers are dividing areas of pavement, and so those are put together. You can see the details added to the booth there. Make sure, if you haven't seen it yet, there's a previous video that was posted that has more information on the details added to the check-in and check-out booths. So we picked up 3 cars, or a set of 3 from track 3, and then a set of 2 from track 2, and now we're putting them into the load unload tracks so that the MyJack cranes can work on transferring the containers. As we were watching this, we've seen a couple of trains moving through the Global 3 area. As I've mentioned in previous videos, when I run trains, I usually will have a couple of trains just running around the layout just to add some interest. So there's a manifest train and a double stack train that's running right now. So we'll see both of them, I think, at least one more time. Alright, so we have one track done. A conductor will uncouple. And now we have the other set there that will need to be moved to the classification tracks. And then we have 2 more from the classification tracks to move to the load unload tracks. We'll do that from the other side. So here we are on the other side of the intermodal yard. This is the east side. The first 2 locomotives were former Southern Pacific or Cotton Belt locomotives. These are Union Pacific locomotives. And we're going to work this side just to add some variety, but also because the ones that we're setting from the classification tracks into this area is actually on this side of the yard, so it just works out better. When we have an operating session, we usually have at least 2 people working Global 3, sometimes just 1, but if we have 2, this can be done much more efficiently with 1 person doing one end of the yard and 1 person doing the other end, and they can of course work at the same time. They of course have to communicate with each other and make sure that they're coordinated in their movements. On the actual Global 3 in Rochelle, the yard engines are actually remote control units. So there's somebody in a tower somewhere that's running the locomotives from the tower. And I've ridden my bike down to that area many times, and the locomotives will say, or there'll be signs along Global 3 that will say danger, nobody's in the locomotives, they're radio operated. And also on the locomotives it says that they're radio operated. And right here we see the manifest train coming through. I think this is the second time for the manifest train. Those remote control locomotives are all 3-axle SD units, I believe. But I do have a picture of 2-axle trucks. When I say 3-axle, I meant 3-axle truck locomotives, SD 40s or something along those lines. But I have seen in the yard locomotives with B trucks, which is 2 axles per truck. So this version of the Global 3, we use all 2-axle B units, or B trucks. Alright, so we pulled the cars out of the load-unload tracks, and we're going to push them into a classification track. And then I think the 2 cars that we need to replace are together, so we'll just pick them up in one step. Here you see an Atlas semi-truck, not the most detailed truck. Notice Showcase Miniatures has some truck detailing parts, so I might look into getting some detailed parts for those, see if I can't make those look a little bit better. I'd like to get my hands on a bunch more of the Trainworks semi-trucks, but right now they're not producing any for some reason. I think it's factory problems in China. Alright, those are all put away, and now we'll need to go pick up the cars that we need to move into the load unload area. Here we'll get a little bit different view here. Looks like we have the double stack train coming through again. Takes about 15 minutes to go completely around the layout. It's coming a little bit quicker on the video since there's some time in between shots that's not shown on the video. Right here's pulling out the 2 sets of cars. As you can see, I could use just a few more concrete barriers. If you can look where the trailers are there, probably could use some concrete barriers to separate the trailers from the classification tracks. One thing you notice that I need to do yet also is the engine facility, the engine yard, the engine house there, and also the maintenance shed. They're just sitting on top of the ballast. So what I really need to do to make it more permanent is get them set into the ballast, and that's actually going to be a pretty easy thing to do. It just is a matter of spraying the area, removing the 2 sheds and then spraying the area with soapy water and just soaking the ballast, and it'll become very pliable and very soft and very manageable once it's soaking wet. And then I'll just push the sheds onto the ballast and then let it dry, and it will dry back into being very hard and very permanent. So I don't want to do that until I'm got all the details and make sure I have everything done on the buildings that I want to do. So the yard crew has completed all the movement of cars within the yard, and now it will be a matter of waiting for the next train to come through. I hope that you've enjoyed this operations video. I am looking to do another one again yet this Sunday. I'm not sure what it'll be on. If you have any requests, by all means, put that in there. Thanks for watching. Have a great weekend.